So our next two topics is sure to continue controversy in the comment section. All right. But before we get to it, man, I need your help to unplug some more people out of the matrix. And you do that by spamming the like button, then putting hashtag unplugged in the comment section. Let's get to the video.
All right. Somewhat like the mosquito in the nudist colony, I'm trying to figure out where to begin.
All right, I ain't gonna lie. I'm taking that. I'm using that one. I ain't never heard that before. I'm using that.
So tonight you have presented the Republican Party as advocating on behalf of individual liberties, even if that means deregulation so that there could be a smaller government and essentially people can have more freedoms, personal freedoms. Despite the fact that that might undermine the Clean Water Act and lead companies to pollute the waters with toxic waste with no repercussions. However, my question to you is, how can you explain the deregulation that the Republican Party supports for smaller government and simultaneously the hundreds, if not thousands, of bills passed by Republican officials since 2011 that have policed the woman's body and limited female access to contraceptives and to abortion?
All right. Somewhat like the mosquito in the nudist colony, I'm trying to figure out where to begin. Well, all right. So I'll say a very quick word about abortion, a very quick word about deregulation. Abortion first. We talk about birth control and abortion. Let's set aside for one moment the debate about whether or not abortion is a constitutional right. I would submit that it is not. You can read the Constitution, squeeze lemon juice on it, hold it upside down. It's just not in there. But let's assume it was. Let's assume it was sort of invisibly there as part of the Bill of Rights. Right up there with free speech and right up there with the right to religion and the right to assembly and so on. Here's my question to you. Why should the abortion right be subsidized when none of our other fundamental rights are? I mean, you have a right to free speech. Does the government give you money to start a newspaper? You have a Second Amendment right to own a gun. Is the government going to buy you a shotgun? You have a right to free assembly. You got to do it on your own time. You have a right to free exercise of religion. The government's not going to pay for your churches. So,
I ain't gonna lie, man. You know what I mean? I still like to hear people's opinions on these matters. You know what I mean? Because these are sensitive matters. Women feel like it's their bodies. They have a right to decide. And some people feel like, no, you're killing a baby. You know what I'm saying? So I still like to hear people stances on why they don't feel as though, or why they do feel as though, just to hear their perspective on. And the way he just put it is a way I haven't heard before. I appreciate the way he just made me think just then about abortions and like everything that I've never heard it put like that before. Let's just say that.
You have a right to free exercise of religion. The government's not going to...
And I'm going to take it back so he can start over, because that was so profound the way he put that.
I mean, you have a right to free speech. Does the government give you money to start a newspaper? You have a Second Amendment right to own a gun. Is the government going to buy you a shotgun? You have a right to free assembly. You got to do it on your own time. You have a right to free exercise of religion. The government's not going to pay for your churches. So since the government pays for none of our other fundamental rights, why does this right get to be in a category of itself? That's my point number one. Pivoting to point number two. No corporation that pollutes the water should be allowed to do that, because that is an actual infringement upon the common good. In other words, that is actually doing harm to the public. This is completely different from the real point of deregulation. The real point of deregulation is to create a scope in which individuals can transact freely. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean. We have a right to health care, and presumably we have an equivalent right to food, right? To eat. What could be more basic than the right to food? Now, let's assume that the government establishes not Obamacare, because that's healthcare, but an Obama right to food. And the basic idea here is that when you go to the grocery store, you can get food and somebody else will pay. So you walk into the grocery store, you fill up your cart. I would submit, first of all, that you will excessively fill up your cart because you're not paying. And you're going to show up at the counter, at which point the woman behind the counter will notice that not only have you excessively filled up your cart, but since you're not paying, you don't care what the prices are. And so suddenly milk will start costing $45 because some third guy is actually going to be footing the bill. Now, I would submit that this is in a nutshell what's wrong with our healthcare system. That whenever you go to the doctor, the reason that it costs $3,000 when you have a cold is not because it actually costs $3,000. If you were paying, they'd bill you $75. But since you're not paying, and the insurance company is paying, and the government is paying them, the doctor realizes, I'm going to run 45 tests, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, it's all going to be money in my pocket, it's going to be money for the hospital, and this poor dude isn't the worst off. So most of the time when we go to the doctor, we don't even ask what it's going to cost.
And then at the same time, this is where people get mixed up, because we're not talking about the people who worked all their lives and gave to this country and did things and just don't have the ability. It's people that have fought for this country who came back and wasn't awarded this and had this opportunity, fell on hard times and aren't able to do so, but gave their all for this company, who need certain assistance and different things like that. Those who have worked and are of age and unable to get out and do that. We're not talking to, I'm not speaking for him, I'm talking about me. I'm not talking about them as far. I'm talking about the people who scheme and just refuse and who are more than capable to get out there and get it and do and bust their behind, just like each and every other working individual that scheme and get assistance, knowing good and well they don't need it. That's my issue. There's my issue. And that will continue to be the issue and will continue to have costs be driven up because of the reasons he just talked about and made right then and there.
Because we don't care. Because some third guy is paying. So the argument for deregulation is to try to create a healthcare system where people do have healthcare protections, but in which costs are kept down because the guy who's receiving the service is actually paying for it. Let me just throw out a wild idea. If the government were to say to you, everybody in this country has catastrophic health insurance from now on. In other words, if you have a heart attack, you have some catastrophic illness, it's covered. But for routine healthcare, right, everyone who is under a certain income bracket, we're going to give you a $5,000 check. Right? You're free to spend that money on healthcare, and if you don't use it, you can keep what you don't spend. I assure you that this will send a shockwave through the whole healthcare system. It changes the whole set of incentives because suddenly the money is your money. No third guy is paying. Now remember, you're covered for catastrophic.
People will find a way not to go to the doctor. They'll start coming up with their own remedies at home. When you tell people that they can keep the money, miraculously, I'm healed. Or they'll figure out a way. They won't go for every nook and whatever ailment and hangnail and this, that, and the third that they can go for. No, they'll start fixing some things, doing certain things, eating better. They'll start doing things proactively instead of reactively on a lot of things.
No third guy is paying. Now, remember, you're covered for catastrophic, which is actually quite inexpensive because catastrophic events are rare. What actually drives our healthcare costs up is routine healthcare. And that's why Obamacare is so expensive, is it covers routine healthcare, which people should pay for.
Are aliens traveling to Earth using dark energy propulsion? Well, Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb wrote a paper last year about how gravity and dark energy could hypothetically be manipulated to enable humans to travel through space. So are aliens using this same system? Here to discuss this possibility is Dr. Avi Loeb himself. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
We just watched a video where he was going in on Oh, what's my guy name? I can't even think of his name. It's right there on the tip of my tongue. It'll come back to me in a minute.
All right. So last time we talked, you were on your boat the South Atlantic. Is that right, or South Pacific?
Yeah, Pacific.
Okay, and you were dredging up these
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah, there you go. I knew it was going to come to me. It was on the tip of my tongue.
spherical objects from the ocean floor that you argue are interstellar in nature. In other words, they came from outside of the solar system and ended up dispersing into these tiny particles. Remind us again of what evidence exists that you think suggests that those are part of extraterrestrial life.
Well, this meteor that was more than 0.5 meter in size was spotted by US government satellites back in 2014, almost a decade ago. It was moving very fast, actually faster than 95% of all the stars in the vicinity of the sun when it was outside the solar system. It came from interstellar space based on its speed, the speed recorded by the US Space Command. And moreover, it had material strength that was tougher than all the space rocks cataloged by NASA over the past decade. So that raised the possibility that it's a Voyager-like meteor. In other words, imagine our own spacecraft, Voyager, leaving the solar system and colliding with a planet like the Earth. It would appear as a meteor. And the question is the unusual material strength and speed of that object testimony to the fact that it's artificial, technological in origin. So we went to the Pacific Ocean to retrieve the materials from this object. We found 700 spherules. These are molten droplets from the surface of the object when it exploded over the Pacific Ocean. We brought them back to Harvard University. We used the best mass spectrometer that the world has to offer, and we now have the analysis results that will be discussed in a press release tomorrow, Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. I can give you the punchline. The punchline is basically the title of my book.
Interstellar.
And this book appears tomorrow as well.
So interstellar, is that a suggestion that you have some confirmation that this is, in fact, interstellar particles that are evidence of some intelligent life from outside of our solar system?
Well, there are two fundamental questions. First, is the material itself from outside the solar system? That's the question that we're addressing in this new scientific paper, which was just submitted for publication. The second is, of course, whether this object was technological in origin. And the best way to address that second question would be to find a big piece of the object. That will be our follow-up expedition, because you can easily tell the difference between a piece of a rock and a technological gadget that may have buttons on it.
Now, at the end of last month, it seemed like, I mean, I don't want to characterize it as a hit piece, but the New York Times published a paper which included some criticisms from some of your colleagues about your work, people who questioned whether or not these spherical objects really are what you believe them to be, and questioning some of the math that is included in the trajectories as you've been analyzing. You know,
And they called him, you seen that article? They called him single-minded. Avi Loeb's single-minded search for extraterrestrial life has made him the most famous practicing astronomer in the country. Now, was that an underhanded comment? I can't really tell, but that kind of stood out to me a little bit to say single-minded. And it said, and possibly the most controversial. That's why I say that came off as kind of like an underhanded comment. This is the New York Times magazine. It says how a Harvard professor became the world's leading alien hunter.
Math that is included in the trajectories as you've been analyzing, you know, why you believe it's interstellar. What would actually happen if an interstellar object at the velocity that you described hit the Earth? Would there be anything left at all? And I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the argument that there is some inaccuracy here that would suggest that this is not, in fact, evidence of extraterrestrial life.
Well, I don't need to respond because I have the material and we examined it. And stay tuned for tomorrow. The point is, these people expressed opinions. The US Space Command came forward.
I love that. And when it comes to science, they've always been saying if you have the facts, facts is more than just talking speculation. If you have concrete evidence and things to support what you're speaking about that you have, and he's saying, I have that. So he talking real cocky and confident. I like it.
These people expressed opinions. The US Space Command came forward in a formal letter to NASA more than a year ago, in March 2022, where they said that the 99.999% are confident that this meteor came from outside the solar system. We went out there, we found the spherules that very likely belong to this meteor, and moreover, we analyzed their composition. Irrespective of the speed, we can tell if the materials are different from solar system materials. And, it's not a matter of an opinion. I don't need to defend any because we have the materials. You see, there are two other types of people than real scientists. Real scientists seek the evidence, analyze the evidence, all the materials, and get to conclusions. But there are two other types of people. People who have opinions and talk about it forever, and people who are cheering for the work of science. They just publicize science. They talk about science, just like, movie commentators. They don't direct films. They just talk about the films being produced. And you have to distinguish between people who talk and people who walk the walk, who actually do the work of science. I'm talking about a scientific paper.
I ain't gonna lie, I admire his confidence right now. You know what I mean? I like how he's separating himself from the rest. He's saying, I'm not one of them who just talk about it. I'm not one of them who just cheer it on. No, I'm out here in the field. I have my supporting facts and evidence. Keyword, evidence. So I'm anxious to see where Dr. Avi is going with this, man. I want to see what he has to present.
That we wrote, that I'm the first author on, submitted for publication with results that took us months to derive based on analysis of data of materials that we have in our possession. Everyone that expressed opinions about this did not have access to those materials.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of interest in this topic right now. In fact, investigative reporter Ross Coulthart claimed to know the, quote, form of non-human biologics recovered by the U.S. government. Let's watch that.
Just a quick question in regards to the non-human intelligence. Do you know what form it's in, and can you tell us?
I do. Well, at least I do know what I've been told, and I'm sorry I can't go there at the moment. I'm working on further revelations to come out very soon. I promise you that when I'm able to talk about that, I will. It's for a very, very good reason. It's to protect largely sources and methods who are helping me, and you'll see why soon.
What are your...
See, that's why people still remain skeptical, because when you say things like that, and not to say that he isn't telling the truth or being 100% open and honest, and he's being true, genuine, and authentic. It's just when you say stuff that I have this coming out, or it seems like you're coming off as promoting something, that gives people the opportunity to step in and then discount and discredit anything that you have to say, because they say it's you're doing this for financial gain, or you're doing this for another reason, or something like that. That's the part that I cringe towards, or I hate to hear, because I can see where people are coming from when you hear certain things that trigger you, or trigger words, or say, I'll speak about it when this comes out, and it sounds like this is a whole rollout or a campaign for what product you're about to release, or a documentary or a movie or something.
Thoughts on these claims of non-human biologics? Do you think it's possible that those form is actually known by these whistleblowers, or is your work, so different or concentrated in such a different area that it's sort of a totally separate thing?
No. I mean, science is all about the evidence. If the U.S. government has some materials that demonstrate or substantiate these claims, let's see it. But if people just talk about it, it doesn't amount to much, because people can fabricate stories. So telling the difference between what people talk about and what is really out there is the key here. It's not a matter of opinions, because we are dealing with materials, with something that was retrieved according to Grush. And actually, Grush himself did not witness, according to him, any of those materials. So he just listened to 40 eyewitnesses who told him about these things. And I believe him, he's sincere, but the question is whether they fabricated the story or not. And until we see the evidence, I would not be convinced, because as a scientist, I'm just guided by evidence. There are lots of people who talk, but let's keep our eyes on the ball, as they say in basketball.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because you would expect that some of the witnesses would not just be, let's say, fighter pilots who saw an unidentified craft in the sky. But if what is being said is true about having alien bodies in custody, ships in custody, that I would like to hear that a material analyst, a physicist, a chemist, somebody with a scientific background who I would presume the government set to actually researching and understanding what it is that's before them, would be among the whistleblowers, and that the kind of data that we could be getting, the kind of reporting that we could be getting secondhand from those whistleblowers is not just I saw the thing, but there was this life form that was comprised of these elements that aren't available on Earth. Just the way that you've described the alloys in these spherical objects as being of a nature that wouldn't be naturally occurring on the planet. So that's very persuasive. And I understand the people with firsthand knowledge being concerned about coming forward and the nature of a whistleblower and all of that. But I would expect that the nature of some of the disclosures to be a little bit more specific, a little more substantive, a little bit more evidence-based than just, I saw the thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. One issue about biology is that, life as we know it here on Earth developed, based on Darwinian evolution, such that it survives under the circumstances here on Earth, where we have an atmosphere, we have liquid water. Going to space is very risky for biological creatures because there is bombardment by cosmic rays, energetic particles, and it takes a long time, for objects moving at the speed of our spacecraft. It would take 500 million years to traverse the Milky Way galaxy. And that's a very long time for any form of life to survive. And of course, we found some worms in the Siberian permafrost that survived for 46,000 years frozen. Wow. But our biology is still not advanced enough to allow us to imagine that you can survive a trip of millions or billions of years. And so I would be skeptical until they show us the evidence. And other than that, I would think that it's probably, if there are any functional devices, they will be all about technology, with artificial intelligence. That would be my tendency. And by the way, David Grush ventured into territories that he is not an expert on. He was talking about physics that may explain the kind of things he heard. I can tell you as a physicist, this made very little sense.
Thank you so much for filling us in. Your work fascinates us. We can't wait to have you back very soon. Dr. Loeb, thank you.
Thanks for having me.